So welcome to the Fine Motor Skills webinar, How to Help Children Develop Fine Motor Skills. My name is Robyn Papworth and I'm a developmental educator and exercise physiologist. As mentioned above, please feel free to follow me on Instagram or Facebook. This helps my webinars and my small business grow. Your feedback is important for me and of course important for my followers. So thanks very much. So we'll start with what an exercise physiologist is. I'm an allied health professional that sits similar to a physiotherapist and an OT. I use exercise to help children, adults with a range of neuromuscular conditions, musculoskeletal conditions. We serve a huge need. So I did my master's in disability as well, so I majored in autism and communication. So a lot of the work that I do now uses exercise and play for children with learning difficulties, communication challenges, and autism. So if you have any students like that in mind, feel free to ask questions and we can chat about it tonight. So basically over the next hour, I'm going to chat about how children develop motor skills. I'm going to talk about the specific 3 stages of motor skill development, the fundamentals of handwriting, and how to teach scissor use. I go to a range of centres across Melbourne. I go to early childhood learning centres, I go to kindergartens, and I go to primary schools, and I work as a consultant and a trainer. So I'll go into the centre, I'll work with the children that you're having difficulties with, and then I give an action plan for what to do in that centre for those kids. Or I also run webinars like this where it's online. I do these worldwide. So we've had a range of different people come to different webinars. So thank you for your question. Yes, I do go to a range of different centres and I love it. So basically I'm going to show you this and then I've got a little video to show you. So this is how we develop motor skills. You'll see the little picture on the left are our neurons. We have billions of them throughout our body. They're the message system from our brain to our body. And then what I'll look at also in the videos is we'll look at that practice doesn't make perfect. So hopefully this works. I will pop a video up there for you and we'll have a play. If anything doesn't work, just let me know.
We're going to talk about all things neuron. For those of you that haven't heard of a neuron before, please bear with me. It's not as scary as you think. The picture beside me will show you what a neuron looks like and the dendrites that form from one neuron to the next. Basically, when we look at a neuron, we have the cell body, which is where I would say our computer system is. Coming out of that cell body are lots of little branches. They're called dendrites. When we look at the dendrites, what they basically do is when we learn a new skill, the software is within that cell body and the branches are like a tree branch really, branching out so that we can form a skill involving multiple facets of it. So for example, when we handwrite, we don't just hold a pencil, we pick up the pencil, we grip the pencil and we write with the pencil. Those branches are forming all of those messages. Neurons' jobs are to send information from our brain to our body and to also receive information from our body to our brain. For example, as I hold these beads in front of me, my hands are telling me what they are, my eyes are telling me what they think it is. All this information goes to my brain through neural pathways. This is the picture here of what a neural pathway looks like. And when I go to squeeze these beads in my hand, my brain tells my muscles what I want it to do. And again, all those neural pathways from my brain to my hand explain this information. Pretty amazing, isn't it?
Excellent. So Rafi, I'm just going to show you one more video in regards to that. I feel like these videos are a better view compared to what I can do in the webinar. So bear with me. I am learning about all of this technology. Thank you.
The next slide on our neural pathways video is about how we learn a new skill and what our neurons do through a term called neuroplasticity. So coming back to the little beads that I have here in my hand, when we are forming a new skill and we're practicing it, again, go into our ebook, our motor development ebook, where you will learn about the different stages of motor development. But as we practice, we go through different stages of motor development, and our neurons are pretty amazing. They will form stronger and longer branches. Every time we practice a skill of, for example, putting these beads together, our neurons going from the neuron cell body through the dendrites will continue to form stronger and longer connections, creating a nice strong pathway for that motor skill. We have millions and millions and millions of neurons within our brain, and we have an amazing system where, as I said in our last snippet, our brain tells messages to our body through these neural pathways, and our body sends messages to our brain through these neural pathways. As we practice a skill, practice doesn't necessarily mean perfect. Practice just means practice. We are learning to do this beading, and because I'm using a beautiful technique, well, I hope, we have a strong neural pathway. But imagine if I was holding a pencil in the wrong pincer grip, you can imagine practice makes practice. So I am just continuing to strengthen the neural pathway using the wrong grip. That's how we form a habit. What we need to do then is we need to undo the habit that we've formed and create a new pathway. This is where you'll see in our Fine Motor Skills ebook on our website. How we do that is we go back to the pinching activity. You'll also see on our YouTube channel how I have information about that. When we have to go back and recreate a new neural pathway, the perfect neural pathway, we have to go back to the beginning. So we pinch, we start to learn how to pinch again. That forms a neural pathway for learning how to pinch. Then we decide, okay, well now we're going to pick up our pencil. We're going to pick up our pencil in our beautiful pincer grip, and a new neural pathway will form for that grip. But as you can imagine, practice doesn't make perfect. The longer and as many years as we have been holding that pencil in an incorrect grip, it takes a lot of unwinding to do. Not saying it's impossible, but saying that that is a lot of practice. So next time you see a child with a pincer grip or a poor pincer grip, just remember it can be fixed, but this takes a lot of practice.
There we go. Hopefully that wasn't as confusing with the audio as the first video. Thank you. Thanks very much. So I'm just going to bring back the slides again. So when you look at the pictures that we have here of the two hand grips, so you've got my son Hugh, I got him to hold it like an iPad grip. I'm calling it an iPad grip because when I see kids at kinder and at school, they're holding the pencil top down, and it's typical to what we use when we use an iPad. So we're seeing kids see this a lot, and what we're doing is if they keep practicing with that skill, it's going to hinder their development even more, where if we start to get them into this sidewards pinching action, we can get them to use their handwriting properly. I'll explain more activities as we go along, but it gives you an idea of how quick habits can form for kids, and kids' brains is more what we call plastic. Kids' brains change so much quicker than ours do, so it's really important to start these skills early on. So there's basically 3 stages of motor skill development. There's the introductory phase, the progression phase, and the mastery phase. The first phase, you see here, this is my youngest daughter, Phoebe. She's learning how to pick up blueberries off of her tray. In the introductory phase, the first stage, she'll sort of tend to grab them with her whole hand and squish them. She'll drop them a lot. It takes a lot of effort and focus. She'll tend to go to her mouth and miss it. That's all introductory phase stuff. Another example of that would be if we're throwing and catching a ball, we'd be dropping the ball, we'd be fumbling over the ball. It'll take a lot of effort and focus. We won't be able to talk while we do it. And it's the error rate that you can see when they're in that introductory phase. The progression phase comes when they've had lots of practice. You'll start to see they'll drop the ball less. You can start to see that Phoebe will pick up those blueberries smoother than what she was before. Less distraction as well, so you can sort of start to chat to them a little bit. They might be able to lose concentration with the kids around them but continue to catch the ball or continue to eat, and obviously they have more success in this stage. The last stage is the mastery stage, so you'll find that this becomes automatic. So Phoebe will be able to eat while she's watching TV or eat while she's singing a song, and same with catching a ball. They'll be able to throw and catch a ball while they're talking to their friends, or throw and catch a ball while they're standing on one foot. And it's the mastery phase, what we want to get for all of our kids' developmental milestones. So I have a range of different webinars. This one is just about fine motor skills, but if we look at every single motor skill, crawling, walking, jumping, hopping, scissor use, it all goes through these 3 stages. Introductory, we make a lot of errors. It takes a lot of focus. Progression, we can take a little bit more distraction, but we still make errors. And then mastery is we're able to do it without even thinking about it. So what we want to do with handwriting in particular is get them to the point of this mastery phase. So when we're looking up at the whiteboard and we want to take notes, we can do two things at the same time, and we're not distracted by the kid sitting next to us, or we're not distracted when the teacher moves across the front of the classroom. So those three stages, if we get a kid stuck at progression and they give up, they won't be able to get to mastery until they've practiced enough at that progression phase. And it's typically these kids that struggle with fine motor skills. They just avoid fine motor skills at all costs, and it's this avoidance that hinders them from being able to master the skill. And it's frustrating for the kids because they sit in this pocket of progression where they distract easily, they make lots of errors, and it's in these phases of introduction and progression that we need to progress them past it. We need to help them, support them past it. We look at working memory. The reason why I look at working memory is basically children can remember 3 to 5 things at one time, or work on 3 to 5 things at one time. So I'm just going to get my hand in the right view. So we say, for example, we need to pick up our pencil. We need to find our pencil in our pencil case. We need to pick up our pencil. We need to know how to hold our pencil. We need to know what we're writing, say the number 1, and then we need to know what number 1 feels like for our hand. All 5 of these pieces of working memory are used just to pick up our pencil and draw the number 1. This gets pretty complicated if our memory is worrying about being hungry, our memory is worrying about being thirsty, tired, anxious, and distracted. We then have nothing left to give when we try and draw that number 1. Kids with learning difficulties can struggle with even 2 to 3 steps. So you want them to draw the number 1. They have to hold the pencil properly. They have to be able to hold their paper still, and they have to know what number 1 feels like in their hand. You can see how these concepts get so complicated. So what I do is I break a motor task down. So if I want them to be able to write their name or write the first letter of their name, I tend to teach them bilateral coordination first. So like the bead video where they're clicking beads together, I get that bilateral coordination skill down pat so they can use 2 hands at the same time. I then use lots of activities where they have to stabilize a piece of paper or stabilize a tray while doing things with their other hand. Again, bilateral coordination, using 2 hands at the same time. That then, when they come to write, they've developed or mastered at least that first initial skill, being able to stabilize something with their other hand while using their dominant hand. There's quite a few activities in the Fine Motor Skills ebook that you can see. I'll just pop up the link here for you so you can find it. At the moment, I've got it's on sale for $4.50, so hopefully you can see that link there. Feel free to let me know. I can send you the link later. But in this ebook, you can find that the bilateral coordination component has a range of different activities just to teach the kids the ability to hold something stable while using their hand to write. But coming back to working memory, we only have 5 spots in our memory at one time. So if you're trying to get children, for example, to write their name and their name involves 5 letters, you can see them start to stumble. So working on 1 letter at a time, or working on tracing their name repetitively, putting magnets of letters of their name into a puzzle, get them to know their name in other forms before we start to stress them with also holding their pencil. Feel free to stop me at any time if you need. When we look at handwriting as well, we need to look at how we're sitting. So you'll see in this picture here, I've got my son sitting awkwardly, deliberately at a table. You can just see that in this picture here, I've just highlighted it in yellow. He's not settled on the floor to write. When we put our feet firmly on the floor, our feet feel grounded, and our feet give us what we call proprioception. It gives us a feeling of where our body is in regards to the space we're in, where we are compared to our table, where we are compared to our pencil. And it's our feet that are giving us that information when they're stable on the floor. But when kids sit in awkward positions, starting from their feet, you'll tend they'll wriggle a lot more. It's sort of like having a tree with a poor root system. They don't have that foundation to sit and be able to focus. So when we have the kids sitting like that, you'll tend to see they'll lean forward on their table and they'll lean their arm onto their table. These sort of habits get the kids into a position where when my arm's leaning on my table, I can't move my hand. There's limited hand and wrist movement here when their forearm is stuck on the table. When we set children up for fine motor activities with a nice straight back, sitting with their feet grounded on the floor, even standing is fantastic if we can cater for that. It gives the ability for the hand to move freely without the forearm sticking it into that position. You'll see on this other picture to the right how once we get our feet grounded and we sit up nice and tall, we also look long. So it means that we look down at our paper instead of trying to lean over towards our paper. When we look down at our paper, the hand can move freely, the shoulders are stable, but they're not restricting our movement. So handwriting in any fine motor activity always starts from the position of their posture. They don't need to be up stiff like a board, but it's just giving them the idea that they need to be grounded with their feet on the floor and their arm needs to be free to move. I did a technology webinar last night, so I can't go too much into detail, but basically technology is impacting our motor skills in this pincer grip, as I was saying before. So we're tapping an iPad, we go to pick up a pencil. And that technology is also reducing our ability for that bilateral coordination, because when I use my iPhone, I tend to just use one hand at a time, or I don't have to do two different tasks with two hands. So when they come to write or they come to use scissors, they struggle with using two hands at the same time. Technology also is reducing our ability to visual track. So that means we just look at something in front of us. We don't have to turn our head and look around at anything. So when we go to look up at the whiteboard to get information and we go back down to our page to write, we don't have those visual tracking skills that we used to have in generations before technology hindered that part of our development. I'm not saying every kid who uses an iPad every day gets into this issue of motor development. It's just you can see the children that spend huge hours on technology, over 4 hours a day, can also have difficulties with their fine motor skills and their visual tracking skills. My concern as a therapist and of course as a mum is children are spending an average of 2 hours in front of a screen per day, and this age group starts at the age of 2. At the age of 2, you'd be wanting children to crawl around the house, to play imaginative play, to play in the kitchen and push their dollies in a trolley. And we've got 2-year-olds spending 2 hours in front of a screen. All those motor development opportunities to go through those 3 stages of motor development, children are missing when they're sitting behind a screen. The neuroplasticity and the neurons of their brain are becoming fantastic at using a screen and being able to open browsers and press into apps. But that neuroplasticity isn't happening as much for crawling, running, hopping, and imaginative play. So I always like to highlight that technology is playing a role in our motor development, and it's pretty scary. Thanks, Rathi. Thank you. As I mentioned in the short clip from the YouTube clip before, to develop pincer grip, we start to learn the action of pinching. When we pinch our fingers together, our proprioception in our hand gives us an idea of where our hand is compared to our arm, where our thumb is compared to our fingers. And it's this pinching action that needs to happen before we even put a pencil into a child's hand. So picking up small objects like the picture here helps to develop those skills. Also, tucking a handkerchief or a peg in the inside of the last 2 fingers can stop children from grabbing at objects. Instead, they just use 2 fingers and a thumb. Basically, when we learn any skill, so going back to when Phoebe was picking up the blueberries, babies and children learn to pick up objects before they learn to drop them. So we need to develop both parts of that process. So it's important to pick up tiny little objects, but it's also important to be able to let them go. Activities like sprinkling is really important. So sprinkling salt or sprinkling glitter is a great way for us to control the force of our fingers. We grab a bunch of sprinkles and we slowly release them. Another one of my favorites in the Fine Motor Skills ebook are things that we can do with coins. Say, for example, grabbing 3 or 4 coins, but only slowly releasing 1 coin at a time into a money box. It gives you that pinching action, but the coins in your hand also make sure that you close these last 2 fingers. Another important part of handwriting is our wrist extension. So when we write, we tend to see some kids who hold their hands like this have a lot of difficulty with pencil pressure. So they hold the pencil too tight. They also are restricted in how they can form their letters because their wrist restricts their movement. We also see that kids who struggle in this grip will just fatigue quicker, because you can imagine when our wrist is flexed that whole time, our wrist does really fatigue a lot faster. So activities that I love to do with kids is lots and lots of tea parties where we carry the tray with our hands out extended. Sorry, I'm not sure if you can see me from there. Carrying a tray encourages that wrist extension that we need for handwriting. We need wrist extension not just for handwriting, we also need it for doing up buttons. If you imagine when you're doing up your buttons, you have to have your wrists flat. It's hard to do up buttons in this position. And also brushing our teeth, we want our wrist to be flat. We tend not to want it to be crooked. Other activities that are my favorite is balloon tapping. So when we raise our hand up to tap a balloon, you can see that the wrist is nice and straight, and also writing above our head height. So I get kids to write with paintbrushes on fences or to write on easels, because it automatically gets them to write in a beautiful wrist extension. Introducing all of these activities at the ages of 3 and 4 starts them in the proper trajectory for handwriting. You get rid of all those yucky habits of flexion and funny hand grips if we do all these beautiful fine motor skills in the ages of 3 and 4. Children who avoid these activities, there's heaps of them, we tend to do similar things but with cars. So we pinch tiny cars and we drive the cars up the wall, or we pinch tiny trains. There's a mini train toy that you can get, and they're little trains about that big, and you drive the trains around. Gets them still in that pincer grip that they need, but it develops them further. Then we don't want them to just avoid fine motor skills altogether. When we use scissors, I'm just going to show you this video. It's easier again to show you the video than to try and do it all in here. I have a scissor video for you to watch. Scissors is quite a complex process. It's not as simple as just grabbing out a pair of scissors and away you go. So if you watch this video, let me know what you think. Any questions, feel free to ask. I'll turn my microphone off now for you.
Hello. So I had a learner of mine at a workshop this morning ask me about how to encourage scissor use for kids aged between 3 and 6, and of course kids who have developmental delay. So I thought I'd make my first ever video about scissor use. What we work on when we work with motor skills is we have a 3-phase process. With motor skills, we always have an introduction, we then progress our skills, and then we master them. The difficulty with scissor use is when we have a piece of paper and some scissors. That's called bilateral coordination, where we need to use our left hand and our right hand at the same time. If we get a kid to try and cut a piece of paper without mastering the use of these muscles, then we get a lot of hacking type scissor use. So they snip at it rather than a beautiful fluid motion. So I'm going to run you through the steps of how to get a child from the start of learning how to use the scissors to being able to master that skill. So here we go. So if you think about the movements that are required to pick up a pair of scissors and use them, if you look at my hand here, the muscles that I'm using in a pair of scissors are my thumb and my first 2 fingers in a rhythmic pinching type action. To master the skills of scissor use, we need to first master this pinching type action. So songs like the Crab song can help with this action, but I wouldn't even start worrying about scissors until you can master this rhythmic pattern. Making sure that every time they do this exercise or this to a song, these fingers aren't moving, the little 2 fingers aren't moving, and we can sing the song and concentrate on a song while being able to master this exercise. This exercise in itself has those 3 stages. The introduction, we might find the kids will really look at their fingers struggling how to find them. Once they finally find how to do that, they'll progress and their movement will get a little bit quicker. And once they can master this skill, they'll be able to do something else at the same time. So I've mastered this skill because I can talk to you right now while pinching my fingers together. Pretty cool. So then we want, okay, so we've mastered that, that's fantastic. We then want to do bilateral coordination. We want to be able to pinch our fingers together while doing something with this left hand, because for scissors, we need 2 hands. So I usually progress up to something like this pincher fork. Now I know that for us, we can only fit 1 finger in here. Some tiny fingers might be able to fit 2, even if you can just get 1 finger to get used to a pincer grip. So now we're progressing it to being able to use our pincher muscles with a tool, because scissors are a tool. So we're going to try and pinch, say, pom-poms. Look, I can't even do it. So I'm going to use 2 hands to pinch a pom-pom. Ta-da! Bilateral coordination. My left hand is helping my right hand pinch together. Similar to my left hand would be the paper and my right hand would be the scissors in a scissor activity. So we've gone from learning the pincher action to using the pincher tool on something quite basic before we even worry about the scissors. Next thing with the scissors, I'm going to move it closer for you. If we think about picking up scissors, you'll get kids hold them in awkward positions or hold them in really unusual positions. Picking up a pair of scissors is one skill, so we need to practice it. So we pick up the scissors, we teach them how to put the thumb in the little hole, the fingers in the big hole, and we don't do anything else. We put the scissors back down. We practice putting our thumb in the little hole, our fingers in the big hole, and we pick up our scissors. Step one, right? We then can start to understand scissors. We might have a little turn of opening our scissors and shutting them. We might even do the song, open, shut them, yeah? To get them used to the scissors first. We can't get cutting paper until we've mastered what scissors are even involved with in a safe manner. What I suggest then is, so we can do scissors, we know how to pick them up, we can pick up in the right manner, we have our thumb and fingers in the right hole. We will then move on, letter T, we will then move on to cutting a piece of paper. To cut a piece of paper, I would always start with a thicker piece of paper. If you think about it, I'm going to hold this paper in my left hand, and holding this piece of paper versus this floppy moving piece of paper, this one's going to be a lot easier. I also use coloured card that's bright, so my visual system is triggered with this activity. So I get my cardboard and I use my scissors and I cut a piece of card first. Once I can master that, I can then even start to worry about cutting a piece of paper. To make this activity easier, you can have lined cutting pieces of paper with straight lines first. Just give them something really simple to follow first. That is how you go from having no scissor skills to scissor skills. Thank you for watching.
Excellent, we're back. I'll just open the file again. Thank you for your patience. So basically what I spoke about in the video was always cardstock first, and I always do small strips as well. So what we see a lot of things happening is we'll give a child in prep this template of, say, a turtle to cut out or a big circle to cut out, and we haven't even taught the kids how to pick up the scissors yet. So we'll find typically the kids who struggle with their fine motor development get to this activity and freak out because not only are they confused by how to cut the scissors, but then the task becomes too complex. When the task becomes too complex, we tend to avoid the task and not want to participate in it. We're silly with our friends and all those sorts of things. So making sure that every child knows how to pick up a pair of scissors, knows how to pinch, all those types of things. Another one that I like to do is seeing if they can even tear paper. So when you've got the strips, if you see if they can, with just their pincher fingers, tear the paper, you'll automatically see the kids who struggle with fine motor because they go to rip at the paper with a full grasp action. Until kids can start to master that tearing action, again, we haven't got our pincher grip down pat yet. So trying to think of all those things before we get kids involved in scissors. When I look at the work that I do in the education sector is I'm using fine motor skills in the work that we're already doing. And most of us are already doing this. You'll be surprised how much of it you're doing. It's just when we come to our documentation and our data collection, it's using the terminology that will cater for what you're trying to achieve. So in the sand tray, in the sand, on the left-hand side, I tend to use different colors of sand, different smells. You can put lavender oil and those types of things. And I hide the letters under the tray so they have to dig under. It also gets kids doing object permanence where they learn that something is behind something else. This digging action teaches the hands where they are. So when we get sensation to our fingers and our hands, we start to learn, oh, that's how far our hands are from our body. And it's those two areas of our brain, our somatosensory cortex where we sense things and our motor cortex where we move. Those two sections of the brain are side by side. So when we go put our hands through a sand tray or through a rice tray, we're immediately learning and linking our hands to our sensory system. Spatial awareness. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. So spatial awareness and the words proprioception run together. And it's that feeling of where our body is in space and in relation to other body parts. And all fine motor skills really is the challenge that children have with spatial awareness. I see a lot of kids have difficulty with hand spatial awareness when I get them to tear a piece of paper. They don't know where their hands are. I also get them to do activities like where they pinch from one finger to the next. And they really struggle with that concept because they don't understand where one finger is in comparison to the other. So you can imagine how complex it is when they go to pick up a pencil or a pair of scissors and we have to use a tool in our hands that we don't even know how our hands work. So absolutely, spatial awareness is key. You can see other activities that I always like to put into the literacy section where we write letters on pegs and we do scrunching of paper and glue it to different activities. I try first to not give a specific expectation of the task. So say, for example, you can see the scrunched up paper letter S. I'm not too bothered about the letters yet. It's more, let's start them scrunching up tiny pieces of paper. Let's get them gluing them onto the piece of paper in any way that they want. It's just getting these tiny movements involved. If they're not the type of kids that are going to come and sit at a PlayStation where there is fine motor and craft activities, it's getting that involved outside where we hide trains and trucks and dolls underneath sand, getting them to scrunch the tan bark, getting them to tear leaves, all those sorts of things to bring wherever their interest is, bring fine motor into their interest and chuck in a few letters of the alphabet to address the literacy stuff. Actually, while I'm thinking of it, Rathi, what age group do you currently work with or are you a parent of? What age group? 3 to 5. Oh, fantastic. So we're sitting right in the same ballpark. Excellent. So typically when it comes to 3 to 5, we're not expecting them to be able to, say the alphabet all in one hit or be able to write lowercase and uppercase letters. We're just getting them to have involvement of the letters in their space. So we might chat about it from time to time. I tend not to push these kids. When we're doing fine motor, I just want to focus on fine motor. But if we have it in the background, there's these letters that keep coming up and popping up, it just gives the brain a little bit more understanding of the literacy. Sprinkling is, so the top left image here where the letter A is, you can see the sprinkling cups, the 3 cups. I tend to just put, I think one of them's rosemary, one of them's paprika, one of them's little tiny sesame seeds. I tend to use different textures to sprinkle with so they can get that proprioception and that spatial awareness in their hands. And I just put tiny bits of glue on a piece of paper. They sprinkle away. And what I love is I also love sensory therapy. So those smells that they get from the foods become a sensory therapy for them at the same time. The flashcards that you can see with the balls, I'll just circle it for you because it's quite a random picture to have up there. I get children to put the flashcards on the wall, whether it be letters or shapes or numbers, and I get the kids to throw a ball at it. They love it. What we're looking for when they're throwing a ball is that their shoulders are staying still and it's just their arm that's moving. They're not tending to twist or anything like that. Throwing a ball at a wall gives shoulder stabilization. It's another important skill that you'll read in the ebook that I showed you before. We can fly, swat, sight words and all that sort of fun stuff. Again, getting us aware of where our body is in regards to the wall and in regards to the flashcard. And then the little activities down the bottom is all those tiny little toothpicks and tiny letters. Just get that pinching action again that we have. Blocks, kids love blocks, so I put letters on all of those. Blocks involve bilateral coordination where we're pushing 2 blocks together at the same time. Again, another skill that these kids who struggle with handwriting really need. These maths, it's pretty creative. I love to involve maths. You guys probably know all this already, but maths is all about counting and number recognition and order, those types of things. I just use it in a fun way. I tend to use a lot of pom-poms and sprinkles and charting. Popsicle sticks are fantastic. So putting things on popsicle sticks in order. Popsicle sticks, we have to hold the popsicle stick and put the pom-poms on. It all helps, again, with that bilateral coordination. A lot of kids that I see love cars, trains, dolls. So I use that in all of my therapy. Dolls putting on dresses, taking off dresses. In the dollhouse, I draw little furniture or floor plans of the dollhouse. And it's getting them to use their hands in those activities as much as possible. So the last slide really is about how we get these kids to catch up. I always use large movements first. Our shoulders learn how to form a letter before our hands. Funny thing about that, because obviously our brain is closer to our shoulder. We learn those skills first. Our larger muscles in our legs learn before our feet. So those habits of learning big movements first and then bringing it down into small movements is really great for fine motor development. We break everything down into those small components. So like the scissor video that I showed you, where you think that we're going to just use scissors and cut straight into cutting paper, but we're actually bringing it right back down to just this pinching action. Small components first. Encouraging participation all the time, lots and lots of practice, whether that means getting out in the yard if they're out in the yard and that's where we need to approach them, whether that means bringing them into an activity and we know they're going to be interested in it. If they want to avoid handwriting or even attempting to pick up a pencil, see if you can do a work reward system where if they do a letter, they get a special component of their toy. What I tend to use, I use car tracks a lot, where I'll give them one track at a time. So when they come and do work, I'm a therapist, so I tend to have to get them to work hard. When they do a bit of work for me, I give them the car track that they need. Or when they do a bit of work for me, I give them the art supply that they need. And we build up their supply list with the more work that they do. The most important part really is the child is not going to master these skills unless they practice them. So we need to get them to be engaged with it. We need to get them to practice it. So what we've got from today is hopefully you understanding the components of handwriting, the posture, wrist extension, pincer grip, and of course how children develop those 3 stages of learning. I've got another 20 minutes up my sleeve. If you have any questions, if you have any feedback, please let me know. If you have a particular challenge that you're having with fine motor development, please let me know. And you can ask as many questions as you like. I'll just stop the recording here and you'll get the recording via email, but please send in those questions and I'll answer as many as I can. Thank you.